Hey everybody, I just impromptu was decided to hop on here. I was painting a different mirror. Here, let me try and cover up some of that glare. I was painting a different mirror and using a wet sanding technique. It's not really sanding per se, so I'm not really sure how it got that name. But you can basically take anything while it's wet and distress it. So I'm just using some paper towels, and hopefully you can see okay. But you're just going to start with a light touch. And some of this is dried already because of course I could not get a good shot so you could actually see what I was doing. But you're just going to go and, like over here where I can see it's dried a little bit more, I can add some of the wet paint from my paper towel, and it will kind of loosen the paint that's dried a little bit. And then down here where it's really shiny and wet, I'm doing a much lighter touch. And you really do not want to look at me because I did not plan on being on here. So I have no makeup on. Not that I ever wear very much, but. So hopefully you can see I'm just like changing the pressure, always going with the grain of the wood, and it's taking the paint off. So down here, hopefully you can see it. And I'm sorry it's shaking. I am on a kind of a bungee cord kind of stand and not my tripod, so it shakes. And then this table's on wheels and it shakes. But it basically naturally sands it. And so where it's dried, I'm applying a little bit more pressure. Where it's still wet, I'm trying to be light because you just want to kind of see how it's pulling off onto the paper towel. Because really there is an art to distressing. Because a lot of it came off over here already, I want to be very careful not to distress it anymore, but I need a little bit of balance on the other side. So I might apply a little bit more pressure over here to try and get the look that I'm wanting. But this kind of gives a little more natural sanded look, so it doesn't have like scratch marks in it like it would if you were using sandpaper. It doesn't make the dust, so if you were doing something inside and didn't want to cause as much dust. So up here it's a little wetter, so I'm trying to go over it to start with lightly and see how much paint gets pulled off. And this is just regular latex paint. So you can see I was a little heavier handed there, and I'm sorry it's shaking so bad. I'm trying not to do that. So you can see it just, when I apply a little bit more pressure, it pulls it. And you can just kind of feel it sticking to the paper towel so you know how much is coming off, and kind of gives you an idea of how much pressure to apply. And I just keep folding up my paper towel to have a clean spot. So has anybody ever used this technique? I probably won't be answering any questions right now, just so I don't have to look at the phone, but if you have any questions, this is basically just wet sanding. So you just paint the piece like you normally would, and then I'm just going back over with a paper towel. You can go over it with a rag. And it's kind of like the more pressure you apply, the more distressing you're going to get in that area. And then a lot of times where you want to sand is on the edges. So if you can't get the edges with this technique, then you can come back with the sandpaper and do the edges. The sanding is kind of like where you would normally have wear and tear on the piece, where a lot of hands are going to touch it, where it's going to rub up against something. Sorry, I'm shaking it. This is nice to do because it doesn't create the dust, and it dried quite a bit while I was trying to get a good camera angle. But if I needed to, I could just go back and lightly paint the areas that have dried too much where I'm not getting any distressing. And that basically wets the paint below it, and you can get that same technique, get that same look. And I can't apply too much pressure because I'm causing shaking, sorry. I got quite a few brush strokes up here, so I was trying to maybe distress it a little bit more to kind of disguise those paintbrush marks. This is just a paper towel. But like I said, on these edges, if I don't get enough to pull off, I will just come back with some sandpaper and do the edges, although it's working pretty good up here. And then all you're going to do is just let it dry. And then since this is a mirror and it's not going to have anything sitting on the top of it, I would just leave it. I wouldn't even worry about sealing it. You know, that's different if it's a tabletop or something, but this is not. And then when I painted, I didn't tape anything off. I tried to and keep as much off of the mirror as possible, but all you need to do is take a razor blade to it here once it's dried, and that paint will come off just super easily. I think that's easier to go back and use a razor blade over the painted areas versus worrying about taping it off. So you can see that time it just picked up a bunch. Okay, so I will post some pictures of this once it's dry, and then the other one that I was working on before I did this one. And as long as the paint is a little bit tacky, you can distress it. You just might have to use a little bit more elbow grease. And if it's really wet, you're going to have to be super light. And you almost want it to be dry. I mean, you want it to be drier, so don't just paint and immediately turn around and wipe it off, or it's all just going to wipe off like you didn't even paint it. Hey, I'm on the thing. What'd you need? That's fine. Okay, so that's looking pretty even. Hopefully you can see that okay. Try it out. It's a great way to distress stuff. Gives it a completely different look, a more natural look than sandpaper, I think. Less dust, easy to do. So try it. Have a good day, guys.